Alright, this is an intro video for tract 13 at the tracks at White River. We're starting actually in the city of Batesville, which is the county seat where these properties are located. White River itself actually flows through Batesville, and that's where we are. We're down here. If you look at the red areas on the map, those are open to the public. They're shaded red, I believe, because they're city public land. So that's a little area on both sides of the river there, right in Batesville that you can use for picnics or fishing, or I imagine maybe put a kayak in the water. I'm not sure about that. And you can see the actual dam right here. So if we zoom in on that, so that's going to be a hydroelectric dam and a lock right there. If you're familiar with the term, then you know what that means. What it is it's a place where if you're in a vessel and you're trying to either go upriver or downriver, you would enter that lock, and they could shut the doors and either fill the water level up or drain it down to get you level with whichever side you're going. If you're going upriver or downriver, the lock is what you could use to do that. And there are 3 locks in this section of the White River. That's lock 1 right there in Batesville. And then we'll back up and we'll go west and we'll take the river up to the property. You'll see lock 2, and then lock 3 is just up past the property. So let's go ahead and zoom way out here. Whoop. Beautiful area, and just a gorgeous, gorgeous river. The White River is extremely popular. Okay, so Batesville on the lower right, and if you start looking on toward the upper left, you'll see the properties up there. There you go. So up here, those are the tracks at White River, and you can see the White River flows from the tracks. It flows southerly and then easterly to and through Batesville. So rather than zoom in on the river all the way up, I'll just show you here the lock number 1, the dam and the lock was right here in Batesville. Lock number 2 is about halfway up to the properties. So there's a dam and a lock right there, also a hydroelectric dam. And then lock number 3 is just north of the actual tracts. And we'll zoom in on that. We've also got the road directions, because it's not likely you take the river to get here. It's much more likely you take the road from Batesville. You take Highway 69 to the north to the little town of Cushman, and there you go west, and we've got the directions laid out pretty well, and you'll see those on the listing page as well, so we won't rehash those here. But why don't we go ahead and zoom in on the tracts. Okay. There we go. We've got quite a bit of stuff labeled, and we just turned the labels off temporarily because as you're zooming in and out on MapRight, the labels get really kind of mushed together and confusing. But we do have tract 13 highlighted in orange so that you can see that really easily. Good location on that, and we'll do a deeper dive on that in a second here. But here's the White River, obviously, just west of the tracks. I mean, just a few hundred feet to the west. And there's that other dam and lock that we spoke of. So that's the dam obviously going across, and then on this one the lock would be on the right side, so that ships, or I guess ships, yeah, whatever the name for that size vessel is, so that they can go up and down river by using that lock, ships or boats. And right here, this is one of the things that makes this just super unique. We've got an actual, what we call a boat launch. It's a concrete ramp that goes right out into the water. If we zoom in on that, you might be able to see it. Why don't we switch to a Google map? That'll be more clear. It's a wintertime view, but very clear. And right under that purple line, you can actually see the concrete ramp that extends to the river. This is a set of train tracks, very low use set of train tracks, and one of the reasons this is so special is you've actually got a tunnel, a short tunnel goes under the train tracks, giving you access to the river for the folks at the tracks at White River. So I mean that's pretty fantastic. That's not something you see very often, and in fact our understanding is the only reason that tunnel is there, because it's been there since the tracks were built, is this was an original ferry crossing going across the river. It was called Walls Ferry, and it was basically a ferry boat, or maybe like a modified barge or something large, and you would pay your whatever it was at the time, a nickel or who knows, back in the late 1800s or early 1900s, and the ferry would run you across, or take you and your family and your wagon or your produce or whatever you're doing, and it had a launch site on the launch spot on the west, and then on the east it was that spot right there, and it was in use. It was a very well used ferry crossing. So when the tracks were built, the railroad company couldn't just ignore that existing crossing that was basically a commercial crossing for people that had to get from one side to the other, and so they had to go ahead and put that short little tunnel going under the tracks to give access to the river there. So that's really cool. Beautiful section of river. You can fish for many different species of fish. Surprisingly, we're told you can fish for trout, rainbow trout or brown trout, bass. I mean, everything you'd expect, plus some you wouldn't expect, like the trout, and maybe even walleye. We'd have to fact check that one. That would be cool though. So that section of river there is check out the drone videos, because it's beautiful. For the most part, it's got sandy shorelines. This west side does for sure. The east side, they might have modified the shoreline a little bit when they put those tracks in 100 years ago. So there's some bigger rock over there, but it's just gorgeous. Looks like it'd be nice for swimming because it is nice and clear. So that's good to have as well. And we'll back up a bit here. So we've got a total of about 36 tracts out here. So it's not a huge development. It's very rural, very private. About 36 tracts, like we said. Most, if not all, are going to be 10 acres in size, I believe. There, I guess, could be some smaller ones at some point, but right now it's just these 36 tracts. This is number 13, like we said. And let's turn those labels back on. Let's see what we can see here. The Google map in this case is a wintertime aerial. We like to use that a little bit, because then you can see on the property that there really hasn't been any sign of any logging for quite a few years, from what we can tell. And a wintertime aerial is good for that, because in the summer those green leaves come out on the thousands of trees, and it's hard to see anything. But in the winter, when the leaves are off, great time to look at an aerial view of a property, or to visit a property. Okay, so we've got the different labels here. As you come into the tracks, you're going to take, it's called Lock 3 Road, and that's this green line that you see here on the upper part. And that was one of the reasons that we discussed the 3 dams and 3 locks so much, is otherwise it's just a very strange road name. But Lock 3 Road, because ultimately it's how they would access the east side of the dam and the lock, is taking that green county road. And then there's another kind of a road or trail that goes up northerly, to the east side of the dam. But the tracks themselves, you got tracks 1 through 6, which are accessed directly off of Lock 3 Road, but the bulk of the tracks are accessed off the private easement road system, which was already in existence. It's probably been there a couple hundred years. But our guys went through and cleaned it up a little bit and kind of mowed it and all that good stuff. And where that starts is it comes easterly off of Lock 3 Road, and then they've got it mapped out here, as you can see, as you get into the different tracts. So tract 13, as far as accessibility, is much easier to access than the majority of these tracts. As soon as you get past tract 13, you start getting into a lot of different roads, and that's good, and that's private, and you know, certainly nothing wrong with that. But the quicker access to tract 13 is something that I think a lot of people will like. Now, why don't we go in? Let's turn that shading off so we can have a look at this. Okay, so we'll go in here. We're going to turn small creek bed on the southeast side of tract 13. So let's turn on the water feature layer so that we can see about where that creek bed is. Okay, and where's that going to be? Right there. And then we need to figure out how to turn off that orange shading, because that does not make it easy to see the property. And I believe we know how to do this. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. We're getting close. And right about, oh, I can't see. It's not that. Is it that one? No, it's not that one. Would it be that one? Don't think so. Sorry, folks. Thought I knew how to do this. That's not it. Wow, come on now. Okay, And some technical difficulties. Here we go. Okay. So in a second, that shading should turn off. There we go. Okay, great. And we'll zoom in here. So here's where you can see where the wintertime view is great. If you've looked at as many properties as we have for as many years as we have, the second you see this, something in your brain goes, oh good, there hasn't been recent logging. Because a wintertime aerial on a property that's had any logging to speak of within the last several years, it's really obvious in the wintertime aerial, because you'll see tops, what they call tops, so they're just what's left of the trees other than the limbs. You'll see limbs, you'll see dozens or hundreds of small to medium to huge brush piles, and for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years from the aerial, you'll see the stumps very clearly too with the wintertime aerial. Whereas with the summertime aerial, even that first or second summer, you can't tell that there's been much logging. So that's where a wintertime aerial is nice. On this one also, we can tell that it's going to be the majority hardwood trees, because we can see a few green patches, but mostly it's these either completely leafless trees or the brown and golden leaves. So maybe they haven't fallen off yet when this photo was taken, but they're definitely deciduous trees. So a lot of red oak, a lot of white oak from what we've seen. We've seen many hickories and chestnut trees out here as well. The fact that you do have the little creek bed on the property means you're probably, I don't even know if I want to say probably, but you're likely to have some big, beautiful sycamore trees adjacent to the creek bed, and maybe some black walnut trees as well. That's something else that we've seen out here on properties that have some type of creek bed, is we've seen enormous sycamore trees which love to be by creek beds, and they are the trees that their top, about the top half of the tree turns basically a bright white as the bark sort of peels off, and it's just part of the tree's life process. But they're really gorgeous trees, and they get huge. And then black walnut trees are the other one that we've seen by the creek beds out here, and they're notable because it's cool to have a walnut tree, and number two, their wood is some of the most expensive wood in the country. A big black walnut tree that can be a few $1,000 just for one tree, depending on the size. So that's pretty fantastic too, like having a little savings account or dozens of little savings accounts on your property that you just never think about, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's something you could certainly check for on this property. The creek bed, basically it would be a seasonal creek bed, we're quite sure. We really haven't hiked down to it to look at it, but other than the White River and a couple of its major tributaries, any of the small creeks or springs or whatnot are going to be seasonal in the area. As we look at the wintertime aerial, you can just almost see what looks like it could be the gravel creek bottom. The blue line is going to be what the computer marked, and that'll be almost always based on the topo map, specifically the vintage topo map. So let's see if that's true. Yeah, that blue line that the computer has used, or the MapRight program has used, is almost precisely where the blue line on the topo is. And we found that the blue line on the topo is almost always right in that it indicates there's a creek bed, but it's not almost always right in the exact location, because a small creek bed can shift. It can shift anytime, but certainly in the 40 or 50 or 60 years since these original topos were done, that creek bed may have shifted 5, 10, or even 50 feet. And I only say that because as we go back to the Google aerial and look, this almost looks like maybe some kind of creek bed, 30 or 40 feet to the north. It would still make sense. It'd make perfect sense. It's in the same valley, but doesn't necessarily line up with the blue line, and that's why is that these little creek beds can certainly move around a bit over the years. Why don't we look at a summertime aerial of tract 13? This is looking like a really nice property. There we go. That's a pretty good shot. So heavily wooded, as you can see. We're going to have some good sized timber out here, in fact. It looks like maybe a couple small natural clearings. It's really hard to say from just the aerial. We obviously do have videos on the listing page, so we'll have a drone video, we'll have a ground video, lots of different maps and whatnot. I guess I don't think we had mentioned it, but this is about 10 acres in size, basically square, so it's about 660 feet by about 660 feet. So good dimensions, good size. You're going to have access. The purple lines are the existing easement road system, so those easement roads have been there 100 years, 200 years. We're not sure about that, but we didn't install them. They were just there already. So let's go back to the topo map. We have two types of topo maps. This is the vintage topo, and that makes us feel really old because it's all we've ever used. And then about 3 years ago, they started calling it the vintage topo. It's like, oh, great. Well, I guess we're old, but that's fine. And then they have the modern topo, and here's the modern topo. They tell you about the same thing. The vintage topo tends to have a little more information for whatever reason that the modern topo just doesn't. So we, given the choice, we'll still use the vintage topo, but they're going to tell you about the same thing. So this is showing us where the creek bed is, that blue line. It's showing us the general topography of the property, and if you're familiar with topos, once you look at this for just a few minutes or seconds, it'll start to make sense. If you're not familiar with topos, then this probably will never make perfect sense until after you visit the land, and you can kind of let your brain match up what you've seen with your eyes versus what you've seen on the topo map, and then it comes together that way. But basically, on a topo map, these lines you see are called contour lines, and their purpose is to tell you the change in elevation on the map. So on most of the maps that we use, the change in elevation between two contour lines is 20 feet. So if you go from one contour line either up or down or sideways to the next one, that's probably about a 20-foot total elevation change. That doesn't mean that it's a gradual 20 feet. It could be from one line to the other. It goes, goes down 5 feet, levels out, goes down another 5, levels out, goes down another 5, levels out. That still would, then goes down another 5, total of 20. That's still shown as just the one space between the lines on a map like this, because if you start getting into something more precise, you would have hundreds and hundreds of contour lines on every little map, which is just not feasible. So the 20-foot elevation change seems to work pretty well. As we look at the map, you'll notice every so often there's a darkened line, and they don't really have any special significance other than every 5th line is a darkened line, because then you can count, if you were to zoom out a bit, you can count from darkened line to darkened line, and that's 100-foot total elevation change, because really what it is 5 normal lines. So like if we look at this one, we'll look over here on track 10 because that looks easier. Start at this darkened line right here, and that's a high point. And if we go down, count the lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one is another darkened one. So from dark line to dark line, that's a total 100-foot drop on track 10 over there. But back to track 13, what we can do, oh, by the way, generally on the darkened lines, you'll see if you follow them around, just take a darkened line and follow it, going one way or the other, and you should eventually run into a number. So like if we do this one that's on track 13, and we just happen to be following it kind of down on track 13, track 15, track 12, over across, and they're 500 finally. So that particular dark line is the 500 foot above sea level contour line. So no matter where that line is found on the map, it's the 500 foot above sea level contour line. So we can use that on track 13 or on any tract to see our lowest point and our highest point on the property. So here's the 500 foot contour line. Pretty easy to see, even without a map, pretty easy to guess that the creek bed would be the lowest point on the property. And that is the case here looking at the map. So if we start at 500 and we count down, elevation wise, we're at 480, 460, 440. And if we go down here, there's another line down here, 420. So the lowest point on this property is about 420 feet above sea level, or close to 400 feet, because once you go southwest onto this next property, then you're at the 400 foot. So probably close to 400 foot above sea level. And the highest point is, let's see, 2460. The highest point is kind of a tie between, oh no, it's not. The highest point's this north part. So we've got 400 feet above sea level at the very bottom, the lowest part of the creek bed. If we go up to this much higher area on the north where the road is located, and we start at the 500 contour and this time count up, we've got 520, and then if we go up in the middle, 520, 540, finally 560 as you get up toward the top here. So it's kind of cool to have a property with the total elevation change of 160 feet. So you've got 400 feet above sea level to 560 feet above sea level. Like I said, total elevation change of about 160 feet. On this property, the most, if you want to say usable, the most level part is going to be, it looks like, the north half. So once you get into this valley, that's all going to be sloped. The way it's sloped is interesting because it's like you've got your own, really your own entire valley on the property. It's almost the entire 3 sides are on this tract, a little bit on tract 14, but mostly on tract 13. And by the way, if you were looking for a property that might have a live spring or a cave, this is a good one for that, and that's just going based on the topography. So for one thing, just having a valley like this makes us think, okay, could be a spring, could be a cave, probably be worth checking out. But then if you look at this and you see, whoops, what the heck happened here? Oh, the button got stuck. Okay. I don't even know how to rotate it back again. What's this do? Okay, here we go. I'm using a trackball, and in all my excitement, I pushed it up against the computer and hadn't realized that one of the buttons was being held down, and that's what kind of made it go haywire. So where were we here? We were talking, I totally lost my train of thought. I know we were talking about elevation change. Oh, here we go. Springs and potential springs and caves. If you look at this little feature here on this property, see those little kind of humps, kind of backwards V's? That's indicating a small valley that's feeding into this bigger valley. So not only do you have that little feature right there, but you've got the same over here on the eastern side, and you've got the same over here, which actually starts on track 14, but then continues right onto track 13. And those are the spots that if you were in a rush and had to go only select 3 spots on the property to look for a live spring or look for some type of cave opening, we would go and personally check those 3 spots right there, because that's where we have found that kind of stuff in the past. So that's neat to see. Also, it's known that this area has some really cool caves, and certainly has hundreds of springs in this area of the Ozarks. So it's not like you're in central Minnesota and looking for a cave or a spring where, well, there's a few springs up there, but very few, and no caves that I know of. But on this tract, it'd be worth having a good exploration, especially these areas around the valley. By the way, that valley might be a cool place if you wanted to do some kind of pond or even a small lake. You could potentially create some kind of dam here toward the lower end of the valley. You'd have to check the type of rock and whatnot in the valley, because if it's very porous, then it would be a big pain creating a pond or something to hold water. But it's something that we've done, and we've known people that have done, kind of dammed up the end of a valley and created a nice pond, or in some cases a small lake. So that's pretty cool. As far as what we were saying earlier, as far as the most level part, that's going to be up toward this north end. So you've got the road going across. You've got setbacks from any roads out here, so you can't put your structure, your camp, 2 feet off the road. There's a certain setback distance, and that'll be shown in the listing page. But get beyond that setback distance and create a pretty large level site, either here south of the road, potentially north of the road, but then you won't have as much room. But I mean, there could be a view. I mean, who knows? On the south part, you're likely to have some type of view, even if it's just of your own creek bed and valley. But this area here, it looks like you have quite a bit of space coming off the road, and the topo map shows that it is kind of trending downward. But if you look at the space between those topo lines, when I see space like that, I'm thinking practically flat. Like, it's a good bet that there would be flat areas within there. So it's sloped down and maybe a large flat area, and that's without having seen it, but that's based on what we've seen on other properties that have similar topography to this one. So, well, I feel like we missed some things, but we've already gone well over 20 minutes, I believe, if that clock's right. So we'll go ahead and cut it. But if you have any questions, just do give us a call. We love to talk about properties. If this one happens to be sold, then we're sorry you missed it. We'll let you know what we have coming up. But if this property is available and you have some questions, you can give us a call in the office Monday through Friday, or you can shoot us an email anytime. And we look forward to chatting with you. Now, by the way, that was tract 13 at the tracks at White River.